July 15th, 2019. Roll call, please.
Mr. Abbott,
Present.
Mr. Bratton,
Present.
Mr. Johnson,
Present.
Mr. Mellis,
Present.
Ms. Parker.
Mr. Bratton, would you pledge allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, moving on to approval of the agenda. There is a correction that we need to include. It is on page 4, 9C1. And on the first line, instead of high school math teacher, it needs to say high school science teacher. Do not know any other corrections. So everyone's okay with that? Is there a motion? Motion made by Ms. Parker. I'll second that. Roll call, please.
Ms. Parker,
Yes.
Mr. Abbott,
Yes.
Mr. Bratton,
Yes.
Mr. Johnson,
Yes.
and Mr. Mellis.
Yes. Okay, moving on to approval of the minutes from the June 2019 regular meeting. There was a correction.
Yeah, it's on page 11 of the electronic packet, item 8, resolution 94-19, inadvertently left off 2 yes votes. So we will add in those yes votes. It was a 5-0 vote.
Okay.
So we'll make sure that that's reflected.
Any questions regarding that? Moving on, we will also need a approval on the June 19th meeting, the planning meeting. There's no corrections or questions. Is there a motion? Motion made by Mr. Bratton, seconded by Mr. Mellis. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bratton,
Yes.
Mr. Mellis,
Yes.
Mr. Johnson,
Yes.
Ms. Parker,
Yes.
Mr. Abbott.
Yes. Moving on to public participation. Greenfield Township Fire Department, Mount Carmel Hospital.
Okay, I'd like to kind of, before we jump right in, kind of explain a little bit of background about why Greenfield Township Fire Department is here along with Mount Carmel. And it's been quite a while, but Chief Brad Smith is the new fire chief of the Greenfield Township Fire Department. And he reached out to me, when was it? Back in the fall, I think? Yeah, probably last fall. Yeah, and as you know, we're always looking for opportunities to try to improve the safety, whether it's the physical facilities or our preparedness to respond to an emergency here at the district. And if there's any way that we can, first of all, develop partnerships with a local organization or entity like the fire department, and also from a broader perspective, work with Mount Carmel Hospital and emergency responses to school emergency situations, and do it in a way that is cost effective, saving the district money, and benefiting Mount Carmel from a PR standpoint, and also Greenfield Township Fire Department. But those are things that we're very interested in doing, and I'm pleased to share with you that after much work, Chief Brad Smith has been able to obtain 80, they're called Stop the Bleed kits or tourniquet kits. I'm going to let them explain how they're to be used. A lot of schools have had to purchase these, but through collaboration with Mount Carmel, and specifically Denise and Therese, who are here this evening representing Mount Carmel, we want to thank all of you for the work that you've done. But I'm going to let them explain these tourniquet kits, and we were looking at purchasing them from the district and getting them out to our classrooms, but we've been able to develop this partnership here so the district and our students and our teachers can benefit if we ever have an emergency. So Chief Brad Smith, I just want to say thank you. Denise and Therese, I would like to thank you as well for working with Brad Smith, and it's nice to meet you. But I'll let all of you kind of explain maybe behind the scenes what went on between the township and Mount Carmel, and how these kits can be used.
I'd say working with Denise and Therese, it's been a long process, and with this program, our goal was to not provide just central locations for these Stop the Bleed kits, but provide these to each classroom. I feel that it's a better option, not only for the students, but for the teachers, because if there was an active shooter or if somebody fell through the plate glass window, the teacher's going to be able to quickly respond to those students versus putting the teachers in harm. to try to get to that central location to get the Stop the Bleed kits. So our goal was to provide a kit for every teacher for each classroom, so they're gonna be really equipped and be able to be fully trained on how to use these tools wherever they're at. And if they're even doing summer stuff, they can be able to use them then as well. Eventually, maybe we can provide those for next to the AED stations and other stations when you guys have events, and maybe we can set up a kit mainly for those tournaments, because I know you guys are doing some kind of basketball tournament or volleyball tournament here soon. But I don't know if Lisa or Therese wants to explain anything else.
Well, the tourniquets, we have two different types of tourniquets, and we will, if Brett needs it, we will be aiding in the training on how to use all the equipment that's in this bag. It's more than just a tourniquet. But there are some bags that have two different types of tourniquets, and then other ones that is just one of them between the brands. But anyway, these were all purchased by Asper Dollars grant, and it was for I'm with the EMS department, and it was to be able to give them out to organizations, i.e. Fire departments, and then to share them with the public. So it was a wonderful, wonderful grant. So
basically each kit is gonna come, each kit has one of these, which is basically kind of an exercise type kind of band that will wrap around and provide a tourniquet type use for the smaller patients. Because obviously some of your elementary students are gonna be small and the tourniquets aren't gonna be as beneficial. So tourniquets will be in select few of these kits, but every single kit will have one of these in here. So we'll be able to utilize.
a person can bleed to death literally in 4 minutes from an arterial bleed, some huge artery that's been severed. They can die within 4 minutes, and that's why the Stop the Bleed program was started after the Sandy Hook shooting in 2012. And so this is just, if we can just save one life through all these kits and then training, then it's worth it.
I think that's what a lot of people don't realize is, it's the time you have immediately following a school emergency, an active shooter
Right.
situation. One thing that we have done here in the district last year, the board has implemented a district resource officer. So we have law enforcement on our campus. Previously, it could take maybe 10 minutes if somebody from the Carroll Police Department was not on duty. If we didn't have an officer on duty, it could take 10 to 15 minutes. And as you know, these things are not fun to talk about or think about.
Yeah.
But most of the school active shooter situations are over within 2 to 3 minutes. And a lot of the children, unfortunately, that have passed and staff members that have passed in these crisis really over the last 20 years have bled to death when several of them could have been saved if they had the proper equipment there to stop the bleeding or at least contain it until EMS could get there. And even, Greenfield Township, obviously, we're barely in Greenfield Township, but they're still 5 minutes, 10 minutes away by the time the call comes in and they get over here. But again, having these tourniquet kits just, makes the district more prepared to deal with an emergency. But again, I just want to thank Mount Carmel, and I want to, really thank Chief Brad Smith for working with the district and making this happen. I know you worked hard behind the scenes, and we're very thankful and really appreciate the work you've done. Thank you. So I would like the board and all of you to come back here, and I'm going to ask the board to walk around. I'd like to get a picture because I know from Mount Carmel's perspective and Greenfield Township, a large part of what you do is outreach within Central Ohio and Greenfield Township within the local township. And I would like to make sure that we recognize and can get some things out there and promote the work that you've done. So it's good PR for all of you. So I'm sure you would want that opportunity. That's right. Okay, let's go ahead and let's go ahead and do it.
You lead the way, Mr.
Because we sure didn't buy them. Because one of these tourniquets, the real tourniquets is $35.
I was just gonna ask how much.
I'm sorry, the total value is $2,211.20. Thank you.
Yeah.
I think it's been over a year since you.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, yeah. This is what we do.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. My goodness.
We're just gonna, kind of line up here, guys, just face each other. Yeah.
Short people down front, right, Rod?
Put you right in the middle, Denise, Reese, right here.
Still moving around there.
I'll just finish.
You could be seen.
Ready? On three. 1, 2, 3.
If you got my good side, whichever side that is.
Tongue is in.
I think I'm down.
Very good. That'll work.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I certainly will. Just email me, I can send it, email or text. Again, just want to say thank you.
Appreciate you guys here.
Thank you. All right, thank you very much. She's getting we'll arrange a date. The week after, we'll get them back. Get him going. Yeah, we'll get over here. Okay. Good deal. Thank you.
Okay, moving on to the athletic department updates, Mr. Little.
Well, I appreciate you having me in, like you do every summer. This is kind of a snapshot. Memory serves me right. I think I did it in December because we kind of changed the calendar. So some of the fall stuff may be a repeat, some of it may not. But I just wanted to hit, I guess, some highlights and bring some things to your attention that maybe just as a board you may not know. So in fall sports, and again, just highlights. So if I were to provide you the names of every kid that was first team all league or second team all league or first team central district, like, we could be here for quite some time. So we had tons of those kids, both boys and girls, and multitude of sports. But in the fall, we had 3 teams win our league, MSL Buckeye. Boys soccer for the second year in a row. And in our league, just so you're aware, when you see MSL Coach of the Year, when you see that kind of stuff, in our league, it's automatic. There's no vote. So if you win the league, you're the coach of the year, just so you're aware of that. So Zach Spriggs is our boys soccer coach. Girls golf won the league, just in their second year as a program. Haley Hill was their coach. She does an outstanding job. In football, took a share of the league. That was the first time that they had won any portion of a league title since 1990. So that was a long time coming. And individually, Drew Monahan won the MSL cross-country meet, so he was the MSL individual champion. Devin Heiberger and Stephanie Graham were players of the year in the league in their respective sports. And just a couple other things. Football, if you remember, won the first ever playoff game in school history, and that was here at home. Ethan Coons and Cameron Shirkey were our only first team All-Ohio athletes last school year. They're up on the first team All-Ohio wall out here in the hallway. And then girls golf followed, winning the league with their first ever district championship and then their first ever state appearance as a team. They finished 10th there as a team, and only their second year that program has really taken off. Interest levels are through the roof all the way down to the middle school levels. And then in cross country, we had 3 kids qualify for the state, Monahan, Abby Matthews, and Caleb Belmont. So it was a busy fall, very successful fall. Roll into the winter. Again, just some individual things, I guess. Landon Mace was our swimming state qualifier. That's the first one, and I'm guessing about 10 years. I'd have to go back and research that, but it's been some time since we had a swimmer make the state meet. Evan Willett won the MSL wrestling. Chloe Davis became the, I believe, 7th girl to score 1,000 career points in girls basketball. And girls basketball won the district championship again. And into the spring, again, a busy and successful spring. In the MSL track meet, we had 4 individuals win an individual event as an MSL champion. We had 17 different athletes qualify for the regional track meet. Similar to last year, more than last year, but I can remember being here since 2006. It usually was take the school band because we had 2 kids make it, or we would have 3 kids make it. Now we don't have a choice, we have to send a bus, which is awesome, but we never had to do that before. And with track and cross country in the fall, those 2 programs have just exploded, both with participation. We had
success levels. The same 3 kids that qualify for the state meet in cross country qualify for the state meet in track. Caleb Belmont, Abby Matthews, and Drew Monahan, they're all distance runners. Lexi Paulson, who was just a freshman, was MSL Player of the Year in softball. She also ended up second team All-Ohio in softball as well. Then as a team, boys track was Central District runner-up, the district meet, and softball finished as district runner-up, losing to Lakewood who got the state championship. So, again, a busy, ultra successful spring season as well. And I just added some notes, kind of like what I do each year, just to kind of give you a feel. Grades 7 through 12, we have 433 kids participate in at least one sport. That was up 34 total kids from last year. The majority of those in the high school. We had 258 high school kids playing sport. That's 54% of the population, 9 through 12. That's up 26 kids. Middle school went up just by 8 kids. So we had 7 through 12, we had 44% of our kids last school year, 17, 18 participating in sport. That went up 10%, went up to 54% this past year. Lots of different reasons for that. Again, to pinpoint maybe one is the exponential growth of cross country and track. Those numbers, both middle school and high school numbers, again, are through the roof. High school cross country could be 30 plus this year. Again, there were years where we had 2 girls and 3 boys.
Position season.
Coaching. Coaches. Yeah, I mean, not to, I mean, the kids have been outstanding, but you've got coaches in charge of those 2 programs that are outstanding recruiters, sell the aspect of playing a part on a team, even though it's an individual sport. They've been outstanding. So, just some notes to wrap up. Coming into this school year, we'll have 3 new varsity head coaches. That's an anomaly. We don't get that many normally. Boys basketball is Joe Goodyear, girls basketball is AJ Ireland, and then we'll hire softball likely in August. We have not hired that one yet. As you're aware, we're completely replacing the track surface at the stadium. It's going to be great. Track coaches are excited about it. Just something about numbers. Cost of sports officials last year exceeded $33,000. That's up about $3,000 from the year before. And it's like anything else. Even on a grander scale in the school district, our officials' fees go up about every other year. So that will never decrease. It always goes up. And a lot of it is the shortage of officials. I serve on a committee within Central Ohio that sets the officials' rates. And then the officials just put you behind the 8 ball. They literally say, we will not do games unless you increase the rates. And we don't have much of a choice. The committee serves so that all leagues in Central Ohio pay the same, because it used to have, a soccer official would go to an OCC game for 70 because the MSL would only pay 50. So we all pay the same to avoid that. These officials associations band together and just refuse to take games until they get what they want. So that price increase concerns me. We increased, if you remember, our league admission rates, I think it was 3 years ago, went from $5, $3 to $6, $4, but it just continually offsets because of the increase in everything else. So our local sponsorship dollars have been a huge help to offset that. And we bring a substantial amount of money doing that. That's helped float the boat, I guess, and keep us in the positive. That's something to try to keep an eye on every year.
Do you ever see like the participate or play to participate? Do you ever see that have to increase at all?
It's been at $100 for 7 or 8 years.
Yeah, at least, yeah.
That doesn't seem like it.
That goes into our general fund, and it just offsets the coaching supplementals
Right.
and the travel costs. So I don't think there's any plans to increase that.
Have you seen games sold?
Not here specifically. In Central Ohio, yeah, soccer specifically.
Soccer, yeah.
Soccer's the tough one. Lower level baseball, softball, middle school baseball, softball. That is a dying breed, middle school baseball and softball teams, because travel ball plays at the same time and they pay more. Quite frankly, we pay $40 for a middle school softball official. They could do travel game for $55. So,
What about the next one? You haven't got to it yet, but
yes.
supplemental contract scale
Yes.
generally unchanged since 2003-4. Do you think it should be increased?
Yes.
Okay.
And I feel better standing here and saying that because I'm not coaching anymore, so it's not a selfish interest.
I would have asked anyway.
Yeah, just in talking with,
That's a long time.
other schools, and I don't know if this is the platform to do, I certainly will go in a long speech, but it becomes more and more difficult, specifically the lower levels, to fill those spots. Some of our middle school coaches, before they take any certifications, which we don't support, and have any deductions out of their check, they're at $1,000 or $1,250 for a full season. It's gonna cost you, if you're a first year coach, about $200 to get certified and everything, so now you're down below 1,000, and then you have all the other deductions, and we're asking guys and gals to coach basketball for 5 months and take home $700. I think it's pretty difficult to maintain those people. It also becomes more difficult for replacing head coaches to get experienced guys and gals to come in because our scale taps out far below many neighboring districts, just for what that's worth.
Under 1,200, that sounds like a Board of Education then.
That's legit. That's legit.
Very similar.
So the only other thing I noticed on there, there's two other things. One's not on here. One was we finished second in the MSL Buckeye in all sports points. And that literally is just figured on your place in each sport. So if you finish first, and there were 8 schools in the league that have the sport, you get 8 points all the way down to 1 for last. You have to have at least half the league sponsor the sport to get points. So like swimming, half the Buckeye does not have swimming, so you don't get points for that. So we trailed Taze Valley, which has been the story for years because of enrollment. They just kill us in the sports where numbers matter. They just kill us. So I think we were within 10 points, so nobody likes being second, but second was a solid athletic year for us. And then the only thing I forgot to put on here, something that we're really looking forward to, talking with Mr. Conrad, head coaches, Mr. Hahn, we're instituting a leadership institute at the high school starting this fall. It'll be semi-incorporated in a leadership course that Wade Bartholomew, our head football coach, is teaching during the day. And we're also going to have a committee of athletes and coaches. We're also involving teachers as well. We had lots of talks throughout this year and even previous years. Just concerns internally and looking externally within our district of the culture that's developed in athletics, or the concept of team seems to be going by the wayside. I call it the AAU culture, even though I've coached AAU. It's just more individualized. Again, we talk about the shortage of officials, and there's lots of different reasons for that, but a big part of it's fan behavior. So we talk about a lot of that stuff. So we're trying to put together, we're working with a guy named Jack Slavinsky, who's a professor at Ohio State, a professor at Fisher College of Business. He's working with businesses, working with CEOs, to try to create a better culture and teach leadership instead of expecting our kids to be leaders. We're going to try to teach them how to do that. So we're going to count on our head coaches to get involved and buy into this. Those head coaches are going to nominate kids to be on this leadership institute. We're going to try to do that once a month during the school day. So block off like 5th and 6th period, just take those kids out. Whoever we've got available, Jack Slavinsky will be there, and we'll kind of coordinate it along with Mr. Conrad, myself, Mr. Bartholomew. So we're looking forward to it. It's not a one-year fix. It's something that we feel like we're going to have to continue on. So we're going to try to get freshmen and sophomores involved so they can get it, take it back to their teams, and then continue it forward instead of training seniors who then graduate and start over again. So looking forward to that to see how it goes. Jack works with a multitude of schools, specifically in Central Ohio, with rave reviews. Shows lots of statistical and scientific evidence that shows culture, how it relates to winning. Not that winning is the end-all be-all, but we all like to be successful. And we're all at least smart enough to know if that culture piece is a huge piece. So that's something that we can attack to get better. We feel like we should do that. So looking forward to that.
All right. Any questions for Mr. Little? Thank you, appreciate it. Yep. Moving on to the athletic boosters. Mr. Williams, Ms. Tozer. She was sweating.
She was sweaty, that she's gonna have to.
I have notes.
Hey, that's all you can do is have no.
You and Chad.
Mr. Hahn, Mr. Bigham, members of the Board of Education, my name is Mark Williams, and I am the treasurer of the Athletic Boosters. Thank you for giving me a few minutes to talk about one of my favorite topics, the Athletic Boosters. Let me go backwards before I go forwards. Our recently completed year was another good one financially. and we were able to do a lot of different projects. We spent about $34,000 on uniforms, equipment, and field improvements. That includes uniforms for boys and girls soccer and boys basketball. We bought helmets for the football team and equipment for wrestling. We also bought this timing system, which I can't say I understand. It's meant to improve our athletes' agility and quickness. And we made improvements at the baseball and softball fields. We also completed our work on the entry to the football field, though we continue to engrave bricks on both those walls. In fact, we had 9 bricks engraved on Friday. To me, the most significant thing we did last year is we retired the debt on the concession stand. That's a project we had in conjunction with the music boosters. I can't tell you what a relief it is to have that behind us. It's been an incredible project, but I am glad it is finished. Finally, of course, our big news is that our longtime president, Greg Schaefer, retired this summer. Greg's history with the group speaks for itself. We do miss him already, but we'll do the best we can without his leadership. Now, for this year, we've already bought uniforms for the wrestling team, and we're doing some new signage for the wrestling area that we've already paid for, and we are buying bags for the golf team, the boys golf team. We are in the process of buying warm-ups for the cheerleaders so they don't freeze later in the football season. And for the first time, we are buying uniforms for the cross-country team. Up until now, the cross-country team has always used track uniforms, but the numbers have been so strong for cross-country, and Luke has done such a good job with the team that we decided it was time to get them their own uniforms. We've also committed $6,000 to improve the shot put area for the track team behind the concession stand. This was supposed to be done last summer, but it's been put off like everything else because of all the weather. Our group continues to be blessed financially, even after taking care of the concession stand and even after the new entry. We have about $110,000 in our capital improvement fund, and we're having discussions on what we should be looking at next. Me personally, I like to see us get a new press box to replace the one we currently have, but we're not there yet financially on this project, and we're not ready to come to you to seek your blessing. With what I'd like to see us do, the project likely would be in the $150,000 to $160,000 yet, and we just aren't there, and we're continuing to work on it. We've also had some discussions about making some improvements to our weight room. Finally, our biggest issue continues to be the issue that's been a problem for the last couple of years, and that's getting new people involved in the boosters. We've had a couple people step up this year, and it's really been a big help, but we need more so that we can continue to spread our workload more evenly. Whatever you all can do as board members to encourage others to come and join us would be greatly appreciated. I can jibber jabber all night, but thanks again for allowing me to speak, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you all might have.
Can you tell them how many events we?
So last year our biggest fundraiser always is going to be concessions, and so last year we had we had 99 events, and every one of those is basically an event where we sell concessions. That could be a JV and varsity volleyball game, or it could be just a football game for a Friday night. But obviously we're the heaviest during the fall when we were all just crazy busy. This is substantially much like when I first got involved in the boosters. We might have had 60, and now we're topping 100. A couple of years we've had almost 110. So just that's one reason why we're able to do some of the projects we've been able to do.
I don't have any questions, but I just want to take a minute to thank Greg Schaefer, who is not here publicly, put in many years of service in every way or form you could think of for our athletic department. A lot of students, generations have benefited because
no question.
Of Greg Schaefer. And I also want to thank Rita Hersdan, who stepped up here the last few years and got involved. And let's keep in mind that Greg Schaefer, Rita Hersdan, they don't have children in this district. Let's keep in mind that Mark Williams, our treasurer, and our current president, Mark Kozier, they don't have children in our school district any longer. So they are true servants. We thank you. We couldn't function without you, to be honest, our athletic department. And it's our students that benefit. just know that your work is appreciated. I wish you could take a step back. I know you would like to at times, but I know your heart is committed to doing what's right for kids, and that's why you continue to do what you do. Just know we appreciate it. I'm glad to see Lynn Paskey and Susan Bedsel step up as officers within the athletic boosters. So just thank you to all of you.
Well, I think I can speak for Barb on this as well. I mean, we wouldn't do this if we didn't like doing it. If you don't get enjoyment from your volunteer work, then what's the point? Otherwise, it's not.
I don't think you guys are doing it for yourselves. It's pretty clear.
I'd like to thank you for all you do.
Oh,
If you
thank
pass-
you.
Can we get a letter to Greg Shea for Rob?
Yeah, I just made a note to
Okay,
follow up
good.
on that.
Yeah.
Great, thanks, Mark.
Thank you.
Barb, would you like to say something also?
Since you have notes.
Yeah. Well, it is our pleasure to provide uniforms and equipment for the kids. And the number of cross-country, you covered that, kids this year, is phenomenal. And they wanna go out there looking good, and we wanna do what we can for them. So the teams get, new uniforms about every 4 years, and they're not cheap. The warm-ups for the, cheerleaders are over $100.
Yeah.
So.
We need volunteers in a lot of ways, just not as officers, but just at events. I mean, if people can show up and work concessions and, I mean, just not the Friday night football game that everybody kind of wants to go to, but it's.
Daughters helped me at
Yeah.
the girls' middle school basketball games. They loved it. Your daughters did too.
Yeah.
They loved it. I loved it. We tried
Some of
to
those
teach them
lower
how to
level
change.
middle school and, JV events are hard.
Yeah.
And just board members, please spread the word when you see people that you think would be engaged. Recruit them, get them in here, give them a contact, and get people signed up to help. We need them.
Well, the one thing is, we generally do pretty well at getting help at places where we need it. The issue where we need help is for people to come to the meetings and do all the organizing stuff that needs to be done. That's where we could really use the extra people to kind of help take some of that load, because that's the thing. That's where a lot of work has to get done, and so that when the football game comes on Friday night, it operates well as smoothly as it can, given what it is.
So would the best thing would be to reach out to you, Barb, or as far as if you know someone, just having contact you, or?
Sure. I'm sure.
And we have updated our booster page on our school website
Thank you.
with all the new officers.
Yeah.
So.
I had asked several times to have that done.
Yeah. August 3rd is the booster drive, and then September 29th is the golf outing.
And we did do Night at the Races for the, was that the 3rd year? Yes.
Yes.
Made, in the 4th year.
4th year.
Made close to $25,000 again. We will have it again in the spring, because it's such a great event. And, but it's gonna be even earlier in the spring, because all the people are getting married in May, and so I can't get the, it's hard to find an event center.
So where will it be, do you know? Or do you not want to say that?
I would like to stay there, but we could definitely use a larger space. Unfortunately, with a larger space, if it's not an event center, it means renting tables, getting a liquor license. It involves a whole lot.
Right.
Where have you had it at before? I don't remember.
Old Blue Rooster. for the
Okay, I
last-
wondered about that.
For the last 2 years, and then before that, American Legion. Yeah.
Does the Legion still smell like smoke? Just kidding. We used to have breakfast there on Mondays, and it was like, whoa.
Any other
They
questions?
support us.
We appreciate everything you guys do. Any further questions? We will move on. Thank you. Moving on to treasurer's recommendations and reports.
Item A is approve the June financial statements. Total expense for the month, $9,040,372.79. Of that, roughly $6.6 million in SCOIC expenses. I did not include an executive summary because there's a lot of detail in item B that we'll go over. So at this point, I'll just open it up. Any questions on the financial statements or the checks written during the month of June?
Are there any questions or concerns? Mr. Bivens? Seeing none, is there a motion? So moved. Motion made by Mr. Johnson, Seconded by Mr. Bratton. Roll call, please.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Bratton?
Yes.
Mr. Millis?
Yes.
Ms. Parker? Mr. Abbott?
Yes.
Item B is approve the fiscal 2019 financial summary report. The report begins on page 35 of your packet, and we will post this online pending board approval. The first page is just basically what I always do to just really try to simplify things in the simplest terms possible. Literally for fiscal 19, general fund operating revenues and general fund operating expenditures, which is what is portrayed on the 5-year forecast. Really no one's surprise, we've been projecting this all year. We did have deficit spending this year for the first time since 2012. That's the bad news. The good news is it was a little over 120,000 when you look at the deficit spending. I always like to, as an attachment point, tie things back to October, because that's where our accountability comes in. That's where our projections come in. And we were projecting over 307,000, almost 308,000 back then. So a little better than what we had projected. However, we still did hit the deficit spending level. And really, if you look at our change in operating revenues, quite frankly, change in operating expenditures, holding those to a 3.4% increase is pretty low, especially for the current fiscal environment that schools are operating in. Has costs rise. It's just the revenues only growing at 2.65%. Just was not able to cover that. Our carryover, which this is the very reason to have a carryover, is when you have years like this, almost 3.6 million. Most schools, when we look at things, we try to look at 20% of budget as a goal. We're at about 17.28%, so we're close. I've got some other figures in here I won't go through. When you look at expenditures by department and by object. The next 2 pages are just how we fared in terms of some of those categories in terms of what shows on the 5-year forecast. Again, I've already went over the increase from year over year. So when we look at some of these categories that increased more than what we forecasted here in the far right, for revenues, it was mainly public utility and income tax. Other operating revenue was a little higher. So again, as you look at that variance from the original forecast, we brought in 1.46 more than what we were forecasting. So that contributes to part of the reason we ended up a little better than what we had anticipated. We do the same for expenditures. The good news here is the categories that increase exponentially. In other words, FY20's baseline is FY19's end. Your salaries, your benefits, your contract services, none of those were very far off at all. In fact, salary and benefits were a little lower than what we projected. The biggest increase was capital outlay. It's almost 16% more than what we had forecasted, and that's a zero-based budget, so we start at zero every year, so that's not going to grow exponentially. And quite frankly, there were probably some things that we probably could have taken out of the permanent improvement fund and kind of forced a surplus, quite frankly. But just talking with Mr. Hahn, we just didn't feel like that was the thing to do 6 months after the permanent improvement levy was intact. So we were about 0.53% over budget when you look at variance from actual to the original forecast. And finally, just real quickly, we have to track transportation data for the year. I'm a little surprised on this, that we were up this much on route miles, almost 9%. Trip miles, Mr. Little alluded to some of the things that we've just increased, just participation in the amount of trips, and it was up 14%. Total miles up almost 9%. Diesel prices up, average of $2.44 last year, up to $2.62 this year. Kind of all that in culmination led to about 17% increase in diesel costs. So
We added a bus route.
Added a bus route. I hope we can get that down a little bit, especially as we move into a more centrally located elementary. We'll just kind of have to see how that comes to fruition. Again, we continue to track the use of our vans. We drove almost 73,000 miles this year in vans. You can see the savings there that are based on, obviously, the difference in miles per gallon. Unleaded fuel was more expensive than diesel fuel this year, but even taking that into consideration, those vans continue to pay themselves back as we move forward. The last page is just again to try to answer questions that I get a lot. We look at our open enrollment in. Again, we know that those numbers are down just based upon space limitations with increase in resident population. But we've got an increase in students leaving. So again, when you have that and you have that net going from 98 to 85 to 64, then you have that subsequent drop in net revenue, and that continues to be a factor. Students going out to community schools, it's stayed pretty steady. Good news here with our food service, it's always teetering on the brink of having to transfer from the general fund. By law, your food service cannot be in the negative cash balance, so that's the last thing we want to do is transfer from general fund. But Mrs. Ignart and her staff, really nice job this year. With very little increases in lunch prices, the operating revenue exceeded expenses, so they have a nice little cash balance moving forward. Real quickly, I won't pepper this to death. I just get a lot of questions on where are we with our state funding. At this point, the state passed a 17-day emergency budget. We are being funded based on fiscal 19 amounts. Currently, both the House and the Senate, their budgets are based upon what you got for FY19 plus some supplemental. And the word supplemental scares me because I think whenever you start saying supplemental, it leads to you can only use this on additional expenses, not to supplant existing programs. I don't think that's going to be the case, but the supplements right now are student wellness and increasing enrollment. We've talked so much about the caps and how much is the cap going to increase, and that was never even part of House Bill or Senate Bill 166. It's been FY19 plus these supplements. Just by kind of the luck of the draw, the increase is going to be about 3.37% next year if it's passed as written, which is about what we had forecasted, thinking it was going to be the cap that increased that much. So that kind of evened it out. However, in 21, we would only be looking at a 1.13% increase, and that's not what we had forecasted. The Cupp-Patterson bill has been put forward in House Bill 305, also the Ohio Fair Funding bill. I went through this with Mr. Bratton and Mr. Hahn at our last Finance Committee meeting. I won't go through all of the factors, but it does try to drive funding toward truly what it costs to educate a child, pupil to student ratios, base costs for student educational needs, librarians, art, phys ed. It truly tries to drive it more toward the true cost to educate a child. Under this provision, because the caps are removed, our increase next year would be 10.7%. So you can see how much this is going to impact us, not even knowing here a month into fiscal year 20 where our state funding is going to be. So again, I didn't want to get too much into the weeds, but I felt like it was prudent to go over at least where we are, where we could be, and then kind of where we're figuring on the numbers. Next steps at this point, obviously we'll wait until we get final budget bill language. We will begin implementing all of the new salaries, new benefits, contracts, and we'll bring an initial budget to the board in September based upon how we ended last year and what we have planned for next year.
Is there any thought about when Cupp-Patterson might actually pass?
Well,
I mean, I keep up with the newspaper and read, and I also read that basically the two Larrys, Obhoff and Householder, can't agree.
right.
That's why
I do encourage you, if you get time, to reach out to Tim Schaefer as our senator. It's
I've called
a
him.
House bill. It's
I've
not in
called
the Senate yet, but
Right.
I
I've
do think
called
it
him.
has a chance of getting through the House. I did email and got responses from both representatives in the Ohio House that serve our district. House Bill 305, as Travis pointed out, could substantially change things for the positive for us when it comes to school funding. It's a 6-year plan, so it doesn't impact the districts that are losing enrollment in student population overnight. It gradually phases it in, but the simulations to show next year in fiscal year 20 a 10.7% increase would be huge for us. And then in the fiscal year 21, I think it has just over a 5%, 5.7 maybe. And so I encourage you to reach out to our local members of the U.S. or of the State House, state
Who are the
representatives.
two House members?
There's a new gentleman, I think it's
Ron Hood.
Jets and then, Ron Hood. Our district is kind of split almost on 33.
Oh, yeah, that's correct.
Yeah, so we have two
Talk
representatives.
about gerrymandering, yes.
Yeah, but that would be huge if House Bill 305 can get moving this fall and change some things in the future, so.
So with the deficit, so I take it I guess, with the, extra money that we have, that we take care of the deficit then with that or not?
Well, yeah,
Does it carry
it
over?
just dips into the carryover.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
Just wanna make
We'll have a better idea here as we plug in the new numbers. Fairfield County is going through a reappraisal, real estate reappraisal this year. That will be huge also in dictating how much those increase. That's a double-edged sword, and nobody wants their taxes to go up.
Right.
But it's, when you're on the 20 mil floor, that's revenue
But my
for
wife
schools.
wanted the kitchen added on to it, and our taxes went up. I said, well, what did you expect? You added on, whole room plus, duh. Anyway.
Any other questions for Mr. Biggs regarding this?
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Travis.
Thanks, Travis. Seeing no other questions, is there a motion?
So moved.
Motion made by Mr. Mills. I'll second that. Roll call, please.
Mr. Mills,
Yes.
Mr. Abbott,
Yes.
Mr. Bratton,
Yes.
Mr. Johnson,
Yes.
Ms. Parker.
Yes.
C, in order to dispose of fixed assets, needs board approval effective June 30th, 2019. Bus 8 and Bus 20, neither one of them were even close to passing inspection. It required an inordinate amount of money to be placed into them. We did not think that was prudent. The truck and the Polaris were both items that you approved on the wish list to be replaced this summer. So just asking for approval
Is
to
it still
dispose. Not really.
Not really?
Any questions regarding this matter? Seeing none, is there a motion?
So moved.
Motion made by Mr. Johnson. Seconded by Ms. Parker. Roll call, please.
Mr. Johnson,
Yes.
Ms. Parker,
Yes.
Mr. Bratton,
Yes.
Mr. Millis,
Yes.
Mr. Abbott.
Yes.
And finally, we're very thankful to recognize the following donations. As you heard earlier, both Greenfield Township Fire Department and Mount Carmel Hospital stopped the bleed kits for the district, approximate value $2,211.20.
Any questions regarding this? Is there a motion? Motion made by Mr. Bratton,
Second.
seconded by Mr. Johnson. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bratton,
Yes.
Mr. Johnson,
Yes.
Mr. Millis,
Yes.
Ms. Parker,
Yes.
and Mr. Abbott.
Yes. Okay, moving on to old business. A, approve the following policies for a second reading. 1, BJA, liaison for school board association. JDFB, release time for religious instruction. And GDBR, support staff leaves and absences. Comments or concerns?
I just have a concern, Sean, in regards to the EpiPen. But we're not gonna go through it for a full free reading of it.
Yeah,
So
I was gonna explain
Okay,
why
yeah,
in the report tonight.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Any further questions? Is there a motion? Motion made by Ms. Parker. I will second that. Roll call, please.
Ms. Parker,
Yes.
Mr. Abbott,
Yes.
Mr. Bratton,
Yes.
Mr. Johnson,
Yes.
and Mr. Mills.
Yes.
Moving on to superintendent's recommendations and reports. Mr. Hoffman.
Okay, just a few things, want to go over, I guess, since Mr. Johnson just brought it up, I want to kind of prepare the board. Next month, I'm going to ask, under, policy readings for a new policy to be approved, that we can do now because of House Bill 296. It was actually passed last fall, and it took quite a bit of time, but I've been working with our legal counsel, Bricker and Eckler, Kate Davis, who's an attorney out of the Dayton office, we are allowed to procure EpiPens. Now, we have EpiPens here for students that have prescriptions for them in emergency situations, but more and more children are being diagnosed, or maybe not diagnosed, but have an allergic reaction to various things that they could encounter at a school. House Bill 296 allows school districts to procure EpiPens. You're allowed up to 2 per each building for emergency situations that could be used during the school day or after school at a sporting event if the student had an allergic reaction to a bee sting at practice.
Right. And how do you know until they're studying for
That's right, the parents may never know, and then
Parents may not know.
again,
It's like Chad's got young kids, I mean, how does he know until?
yeah, and we actually had a situation this spring, and I started working on it last winter, but it just takes some time for our attorneys to draft those policies and make sure that from a legality standpoint, we're in compliance with the law. But we had a situation this spring where a student here at the middle school had an allergic reaction, and the student did not have his EpiPen here at school at that particular time. And if we had one here, we could have administered it. And then you have very specific people that are trained, the school nurses, principals, the athletic trainer, all go through training, and they are here on site and can administer that EpiPen in an emergency situation. So my point is, typically we go through a few readings of these. I want this in place when August rolls around and school starts back up and we have a lot of kids in athletics outside. Our attorneys have drafted it, they've reviewed it. I have worked with the doctor at Nationwide Children's Hospital and obtained prescriptions. I now have to go out and get the EpiPens, but we will have 2 in each school building. I just want to prepare the board that I'm going to ask you to approve that on 1 read next month in August. And I will provide the policy and the administrative guidelines in next month's packet. So that's one item we've been working on. Any questions about the EpiPen?
Will those be in the clinics or?
They'll be in the clinics, in the offices, yeah, the offices. Actually,
Now, do the students carry them on them, or do they have to turn
no,
them
they
into the school?
they're
stored,
kept in
right?
our policy requires them to be stored here in the office. Other items, we have the OFCC Design Development Stage Review Meeting taking place July 23rd, and that meeting will take place at 10 a.m. for Rod and Joe. And basically what that meeting will involve will be OFCC reviewing the design, the design phase documents and making sure that we're in compliance with all the OFCC requirements for co-funding, and that we understand where any LFI dollars may be spent. Just a reminder, July 24th is kind of the date for Summit Construction to be out at the site and start working, setting up the fence, the safety fence, and the silt fence. They should be moving dirt somewhere around late July, early August, and that is all contingent upon county approval.
When do we get our gold shovel?
Yeah, that'll be, I think in October. I do have on my
I'm just
list,
kidding.
I do have on my list for a groundbreaking ceremony. Obviously, I talked about why we can't do that right now with lack of parking, but once they get the rough parking in and get the pad ready, I'll be working with Summit Construction to set up a groundbreaking ceremony involving our community and school board and staff and students. So that'll be, I think, probably early October. The track is almost done, it just needs painted. They have to wait a few more days before they can paint the track, and then a couple of days after that, we should be good to go. I think the company has done a pretty good job. Archie Golis out of Michigan. Yeah, they've done a good job. I think it needed to be done, but a lot of kids are going to benefit from it too.
Did you have to bid that?
We were able to do it through the consortium.
We did it through a co-op. They had already bid track projects. Since we're a member of that co-op, we were able to take their bid and select it that way.
Summer cleaning appears to be ahead of schedule. John and his staff, they've done a great job. They still have a lot to do, but they're ahead of schedule right now. Buildings are starting to come back together. I've been working on just back to school prep, mailings that'll be going out, letters, notices, administrative meetings, district leadership team meeting. I'll be meeting with August 6th and August 8th. Just a reminder that staff start on August 16th. For new staff that we hire, August 19th, everybody will be back, and that's when we have our district breakfast. Board members are certainly welcome at 8 a.m. on the 19th. We'll have our convocation in the auditorium. And then students start on August 22nd. So I think we're in good shape, and again, it'll start to get busy here in the next few weeks. Enrollment update, there's a lot of unknowns at this time. We've had some withdrawals, but more will come as school starts. At this point, we only had 6 withdrawals. I think we will have more again once school starts. A lot of parents forget to come in and sign withdrawal forms, and we get a records request from a district that they moved to. We've had 22 enrollments. Our largest increase is in 6th and 7th grade. And if you remember our enrollment report that we were worried about as we planned for this year, our largest classes last year were 5th and 6th. So we've had an increase in our largest classes, which will now be 6th and 7th. We're at, I believe, 183 in 7th grade, and 180, 182, or 183 in sixth grade.
Is that the largest 183
Yeah.
we've ever had?
We had
We
we had a group of 181 come through here, the class of 2018, when they were in middle school, were over 180. But obviously, I'm glad that we, as we think about our teachers' contract at the middle school, seeing only 170 students, I think we definitely made the right decision adding 2 middle school teachers to make sure all of our teachers are under 170 per day. And then first grade would be our next largest, and we added a teacher there. You've heard my concerns, and you've heard the concerns in general about kindergarten. Just so you know, last month we were at 160. We're hanging tight at 163. I'm starting to get pretty nervous about that. Just so you know, out of that 163 kindergarten students right now, 5 were retained kindergarten students, so that would really take us down to 158 if we didn't have the 5 retained. But 3 of the 5 retained our foster students, and a total of 4 of the 163 students are foster, so that would take us to when foster kids are very mobile. They can move in and out of the district. Unfortunately for them, we're very mobile. So keep in mind that 4 are foster students, and 4 are open enrolled that are following their parent, because our negotiated agreement allows them to bring their child here. So if you take the 5 that were retained and the 4 out, we're sitting at 154, which we feel pretty good about, but the open enrollment of our staff members and the 5 retained are putting us on that bubble. I guess my point is, we know how tight the budget is. We just saw $120,000 of deficit spending. These are the things we talked about this winter, and we're gonna have a tough decision, and I'm gonna have a tough decision to make in terms of a recommendation, but we're gonna hold tight for now. I've talked to our principal, I've talked to Travis as well. If we have to add a kindergarten position, I may have to schedule a special board meeting in very early August to get that position approved, even if it's on a Monday morning or a Tuesday morning at 7:30 or 8 o'clock, and that would be the only agenda item. That's a possibility, so I just want to give you a heads up. And then when we get that posted, we have tons of candidates from earlier postings for the pre-K to 3 license. We had 144 applicants for one, first grade position. So there's a lot out there, and there's a lot of new teachers that have not found jobs yet. So I expect that number to change a little bit, but I'm holding tight, and the budget's tight.
So what's the number where you think we would?
Well,
166?
right now, 162 puts us at 27 per class. I didn't feel good last year, up over 28. I think we've got room for a few more. We'll just really have to talk about it, but again, keep in mind that we did address the priority areas. The middle school, the compliance with the agreement, and then the first grade's at 164. This kindergarten's at 163. Principal feels like she'd rather have 7 sections at first grade, because you actually get into more reading instruction in first grade than you do so in kindergarten. So she's okay. I mean, we had a lengthy conversation, and it's just really we're gonna have to watch it. But what worries me is, jump the gun, we add the position, maybe we're at 167, and by the end of September, things have settled, and we're sitting at 160 after some withdrawals and things change. That happens sometimes. So,
Of course, sometimes you get people coming in after Labor Day thinking school didn't start till after Labor Day.
last year we had 20 parents in August registered.
Really?
In kindergarten. That's what happened last time.
That's right.
Yeah.
Don't forget, you can't register though until you close on your house.
Right, and we always require proof of residency. We've accepted
Because we had to wait forever.
Yeah, we've accepted no open enrollment in kindergarten, first grade, second grade. We did accept a couple in 8th grade, because that class is at 150. And then at the juniors and seniors, we lose a lot of kids to the career centers. So we were able to take some juniors and some seniors as well, but the rest of the grades completely closed. So, and Travis showed you the report that shows our open enrollment numbers continuing to go down. And we're just out of space right now, and that's kind of where we are. So any questions about the report, the update? BC Bloom Carroll High School, second year in a row, is recognized by U.S. News and World Report. That data is on the 16-17 school year. Again, it's the second year in a row, so congratulations to Bloom Carroll High School staff and students for being recognized by U.S. News and World Reports as one of the nation's best high schools.
You're going to be passing that along.
Yeah, Nate's already, he's aware of it too. Yeah. All right, let's move on to 9B, under students and programs. Number 1, approve the 2019-20 fees for the following classes. As presented, letter A at the high school, and B at the middle school, 5th grade $50, 6th grade $40, 7th grade $20, and 8th grade $20. Under 9B1, C, at the intermediate school, the school fees, again, no increase from last year, would stay at $40, and the primary school, no increase in fees from last year, that would stay at $30. Number 2, approve the following cafeteria prices for the 1920 school year. Again, this would be no increase from last year. For breakfast, students $1.25, adults $1.50. Under B, lunch prices, grades K to 8 would be $2.90, and grades 9 through 12 and adults would be $3. Number 3, approve an overnight trip for high school boys basketball juniors and seniors to McConnellsville, Ohio, July 2nd and through the 3rd, 2019, to be chaperoned by the coaching staff. That was kind of a last-minute event that came in after the June board meeting. So that's why we're approving it now. Number 4, approve the following parent volunteers to chaperone the cross-country high school team camp at Old Man's Cave, July 29th through August 2nd, as presented, A through I. And I guess we have a voting on.
Any questions or concerns? Is there a motion?
So moved.
Motion made by Mr. Mills.
No, that was Rod.
Mr. Johnson, sorry about that. Second by Mr. Bratton. Roll call, please.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Bratton?
Yes.
Mr. Mills?
Yes.
Ms. Parker?
Yes.
Mr. Abbott?
Yes.
Okay, 9C, on page 4, under personnel and employment, approve the employment of Andrea Roberts as a part-time, 5/9 full-time equivalent employee, high school science teacher on an initial sequence 1-year limited contract at step 0 with a bachelor's degree for the 1920 school year, pending timely receipt of verifications and background checks effective August 19th. And that is to fill the vacancy created by the resignation of Mr. Dries. C2, approve the employment of James McNamara as a high school math teacher on an initial sequence 1-year limited contract at step 10 with a master's degree plus 15 semester hours for the 2019-20 school year, pending timely receipt of verifications and background checks effective August 19th, 2019. And that is to fill the pending resignation of Jason Barber. Number 3, approve the employment of Michelle Snoke as a 4-hour-a-day, 260-day-a-year custodian at the intermediate school on a 1-year limited contract at step 2, effective July 10, 2019, to fill the vacancy created by the resignation of Ed Derenberger. Number 4, approve Rachel Whitcraft for 4.5 hours at the tutor hourly rate to complete assessment documentation and ETR IEP meetings for an incoming student. Number 5, approve the following OTES evaluators for the 1920 school year, as presented A through F. Number 6, approve the following Ohio School Counselor Evaluation System evaluators for the 1920 school year, as presented A through D. Number 7, approve the following personnel to provide services for a homebound student for the 1920 school year, and that would be Krista Wagner, an occupational therapist, at $103 per hour to correspond with the student's IEP, and Marissa Baker, a physical therapist, at $72 per hour plus mileage to correspond with the student's IEP on home instruction. Number 8, approve the following high school staff Wednesday, Saturday school and detention monitors for the 1920 school year on an as-needed basis, as presented A through G. Number 9, a long list here, approve the following athletic supplemental contracts for the 1920 school year pending receipt of verifications and background checks, A through double B. Number 10, approve the following athletic department volunteers for the 1920 school year pending timely receipt of all verifications and background checks, A through H. Number 11, page 6, approve the following volunteers for the 1920 school year pending successful background checks, and those would be your Group A volunteers with background checks on file.
Okay. Any questions? Please discuss. Seeing none, is there a motion?
So moved.
Motion made by Mr. Mills. Second by Ms. Parker. Roll call, please.
Mr. Mills?
Yes.
Ms. Parker?
Yes.
Mr. Bratton?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Abbott?
Yes.
All right, under 9D, contracts and agreements, approve an agreement of employment services with New Horizon Mental Health Services for the 1920 school year to provide early mental health intervention services per the specifications of the agreement. Again, the agreement is in your packet. It's the same price it has been the last few years. They provide a screening in our middle school, signs of suicide screening, and they do get parental permission. The parents have the right to opt their child out if they do not want them to be screened. So, any questions with that?
So there are no questions, is there a motion? Motion made by Mr. Bratton, I will second that. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bratton?
Yes.
Mr. Abbott?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Mellis?
Yes.
And Ms. Parker?
Yes.
Nothing under 9E other, and under personnel resignations, letter F, accept the resignation of Jason Barber, a high school math teacher, effective immediately, and accept the resignation of Lisa Ellswick Smith, bus driver and lunchroom monitor at the primary school, effective immediately.
Are there any questions? Any questions, is there a motion?
So moved.
Motion made by Mr. Johnson. Second by Mr. Bratton, roll call, please.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Bratton?
Yes.
Mr. Mellis?
Yes.
Ms. Parker?
Yes.
Mr. Abbott?
Yes. Moving on to new business, 10 new business. A, approve the OFCC LFI Design Development MOU. B, approve the Blue Carroll Elementary Early Site Construction GMP as submitted by the CMR Summit Construction Company. C, approve the resolution adopting the Calamity Day Makeup Plan. D, approve the amended employment contract of Sean Hahn as District Superintendent effective August 1st, 2019 through July 31st, 2020, as per specifications of the employment contract. Approve the employment of Sean Hahn as District Superintendent on a 5-year contract effective August 1st, 2020 through July 31st, 2025, as per specifications of the employment contract. Approve the cancellation of the Board of Education planning session scheduled for July the 21st. Are there any questions?
So we're canceling that meeting because, I'm not saying we need it, I'm just saying.
Yeah, we, just in terms of content, we just had Tony here last month.
Okay, yeah, we did.
And once we get through the early site, Tony's getting ready to move in, Shore Architects are getting ready to move into the construction document phase, and they want to get the construction documents finalized and start the bidding, which will be the next GMP for the actual physical building. So that'll probably be, I think probably September, we will have Tony back in, give another update.
No further questions? I'll make a motion to approve it.
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Johnson. Roll call, please.
Mr. Abbott?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Bratton?
Yes.
Mr. Mellis?
Yes.
Ms. Parker?
And moving on to the board reports and information. A, Board of Education liaison updates. Facility management, Mr. Johnson, would you like to update?
Yeah, so we met on June 23rd with Tony and the gang and went through the reconciliation of the DD that we approved tonight in order to get started here in the next week or so with the building. We thought it'd be best to kind of update everybody where we were at when we were doing that reconciliation. We're in really good shape overall, and Sean's going to go into more detail on some of the decisions that we kind of had to make within that meeting.
Yeah.
But one of the topics that we had to bring up was the demolition of the primary school. And at this time, when we were looking through it and just looking at our enrollment numbers, in anticipation of moving in now, we decided that at this time we would not demo that building. We would look at it from a perspective of, have the facility there if we need to put, extra bodies and seats. With that being said, I'll let Sean go into more detail.
I think part of the whole reason for the design development budget reconciliation meeting, just so everybody understands, that is a reconciliation meeting between your CMR, your construction manager at risk of Summit Construction, and your architect, and they have to reconcile where we are. And that's part of the benefit to doing the CMR processes. When you do the design bid build, after all the documents are done, then you bid it out, and then you're told, oh, we have to make changes, you're over budget, you have to cut this out of the project, and you know how that process.
Like a band room.
Yeah, and you
But
know.
that was cut out before I was on the board.
Yeah, and from a PR standpoint, how some people may not completely understand the process and they think things in the project got removed, and that can happen because you're over budget. Well, at each phase, during the program of requirements, during the schematic design phase, during the design development phase, our construction manager and our architect sit down with the district and they reconcile where the budget is. And you get the project in budget as you're designing it. So some adjustments that we've had to make, we really were not that far off. We were a few $100,000 out, and on a $30 million project, that is not bad at all. It's when you start talking $3 to $4 million out of budget, that's a huge problem. Where do you have to make adjustments? We're not in that phase. We're really about $300,000 out of budget in the design process. So what we did in working with Shore and Summit and looking at the district and the enrollment, we did not want to make changes to the design or the square footage. We did not want to give up parts of this K-5 building project. We have 110,000 square feet, and we know that we need every square feet in that building. And we didn't want to say, well, cut out 10,000 square feet or cut out, go from 8 classrooms per grade level down to 7 classrooms. We didn't want to make the gym smaller. We didn't want to make the cafeteria smaller. We didn't want to cut out parking. But one area that we felt that if we had to look at it and not impact the new elementary school and not really impact our students, but still benefit the district. And I kind of like the idea after, you run a levy campaign a couple of years ago and you have a master's facility plan. And the excitement of that was, hey, there's another phase down the road where we can if we clear that site out there after we move into our new elementary school, we can demo the primary school and have a site for a new 6, 7, and 8 building and modify this into the high school. So we were going to, part of this project was at the end, when we move into the new K-5 elementary school, was to demo the primary school. Well, if you don't have the primary school, you can't use it. If our enrollment continues to grow and we get tight in the new K-5 elementary school, we can use that primary school for swing space. Maybe it's a few classrooms, maybe it's a grade level over here that we have that physical building available.
But not the modulars, right?
Not the right, and that's what I was gonna say. I think we still look at removing the modular, especially the ones that have been here for, what, Travis, 10, 15 years?
Mm-hmm.
10
Yeah,
years.
12, 13
I think,
Been here as long as I've been on the board.
yeah, I think we look at removing the trailers that are in really bad shape, but the fact that we are not reducing the actual project, the actual integrity or quality of the building or size of the building, and we can, obviously you have operating costs when you let a building remain. You have to maintain it, you have to winterize it if it's not being used. You do have to heat it to a certain level. It doesn't have air conditioning, so that's not really an issue. But in the winter months, you do have to make sure that, whether you shut off the water and you drain the lines and you heat it to a certain degree, there are costs with maintaining that building.
And when the buildings open back up again, like I know they did it at Groveport a long time ago with Asbury, and it's like, they opened it back up and it was like, there were costs that they didn't foresee.
But let's say our enrollment does continue to grow faster than what enrollment projections would state, and we don't have that. Well, we can't use that if we don't have it. Well, at least allowing it to stay there until we move into it. We don't, and we also don't know if we're ever going to get to the next phase. We have a plan and we have a goal, but if the community doesn't support it, or if the CFAP funding isn't there for several years, we could demo that and we could regret doing it and say, boy, I wish we had a few classrooms, The fact that that is there, we can benefit from it if we would need to. And the fact that if we shift it into the next phase, at the beginning of the next phase, if we ever, go on to build a new middle school, then we would tear that building down or do the demolition of that building at that time. But if we tear it down now, it's gone for 5 or 6 years, and we don't. But it also saves us about $295,000, which is what we needed to reconcile the budget between Shore Architects and Summit Construction. So by not demoing that at this time and moving it into another phase, we can get our K-5 elementary budget in balanced, basically, and still use it in the future.
Okay, just to play devil's advocate, and it really is that. So if sometime in the future, and the population does grow up, especially in elementary school, is there a point where, let's just say the levy passes for a new junior high, and you're still looking at, man, we're really tight on space. would it be wise to put a junior high in a little further down on this same lot and let that building stand for X number of years?
We've
I'm
done,
just asking.
I think we've done multiple assessments, even before I was here, we've
Yeah.
done multiple assessments, and the cost to bring that up to code and renovate it exceeded
just-
the cost of building that square footage new, which is why the district decided to go with the new elementary school. But master facility plans change and are updated, as you know. And, you know, one thing that we have to do is get this building, this K-5 elementary project done.
That's right.
And then we have to see if we're ever going to be eligible for CFAP funding, where the state is now giving us the credit, the co-funding that we got from this building in phase one, the credit that we're earning on the new elementary school.
Which is how much money? Just since we have people here that may not know this.
It's about, I think it's about $3.5 to $4 million per project. I think this.
Yeah, we've
this-
already gotten about 4 million
Yeah.
setting aside in a credit for this building.
Okay.
Total would be close to 11 million.
I think our facility plan, and don't quote me on this, but this building, the elementary school, in the final phase was around the $70 million master facility project.
So it'd be a nice down payment.
And I think if we enter CFAP,
Right.
about 18%, the state is co-funding 18% of our projects, but we don't get that money until it's our turn from the state.
Right.
So we've built credit, but that's about 12.7 to $13 million that we will get down the road someday. And if you remember, in our facility plan,
So you're really talking 20 million all total?
20 million total to finish out the project in today's dollars.
Okay.
But we would be getting 13 million from the state because we built credit on this one and on the elementary school, and then we can apply that to that final phase. If we get the funding and if our community would support in terms of millage rate in today's money, it'd be like 1.5 mils to build the final phase and renovate this, add on the band room, add on the ag room, run the gas to the science classrooms. Those are all things in our facility planning, and who knows if it's gonna be 3 years from now or 6 years from now.
Right.
But if we tear that down, if we tear it down now, we can't ever use it.
That's right.
And we have to cut other things out of this K-5 project to get the project in balance.
And better to keep that building going that way than the one in Life Opera.
Yes, and it gets our project reconciled, the budget reconciled.
At the end of the day, I mean, at the design development committee meeting, we saw really no benefit in removing it at this time.
Oh, I believe.
You know, the modular is fine, but now.
Yeah,
Because
no.
keep in mind, what people have to remember is, we've done a very good job with the design of the K-5 building. We have 110,000 square feet, we have 48 regular classrooms. So that's not your special ed, that's not your music, that's not your art. We will have room when that building opens. We can get about 1,200 kids in 48 classrooms. Originally, it was a 1,000 student building, and it technically still is, but the fact that we're getting 48 classrooms, and let's say you put 25 kids per class, that's room for 1,200 kids, with a gym big enough and a cafeteria big enough to support that in parking. So I like where we are. I like that we can continue to not impact that project. We can reconcile now before the final product is done in terms of design, but I think it makes sense. Keep in mind that when we move 5th grade out of here, that's gonna open up 7 classrooms in this building.
Right.
You know, this building will then have 7 classrooms available. If the high school has to overflow into here for a freshman level class, that could happen, but we still have a classroom or 2 available at the high school as well. So between the space here and the potential space there, if we need it, by not demoing that building, I think it makes more sense than cutting square footage out of our K-5 elementary school.
And this was just, and you've got the GMP. This is our first GMP, which is the first time we've had any cost certainty, quite frankly, with the project. And this was really the exercise that Mr. Abbott, Mr. Johnson, myself, and Mr. Hahn go through. When we get this bid, the subcontracted work, the construction personnel and the contingency and fees, they're not going to change. They were already set when we signed the contract with Summit. But the earthwork and the utilities, which is what's incorporated in his first GMP, was about $129,000 under what we had estimated, or what Summit had estimated. So we kind of roll that into the next GMP. We roll that into some other things like the clever touches that were initially over budget, but we're able to kind of continuously reconcile through this GMP process that you quite frankly, you weren't able to do under the old bid, bid process.
Plus you lose the time, because you would not know this until bid day.
Right.
Where we've been able to head it off, throughout the process.
Yeah.
We're not only ahead money-wise, but we're ahead finance.
The good news, you know, in terms of some of the locally funded initiatives, things we built in, like the money for the utilities, the off-site utilities, water and sewer, the soil conditions, we built in money that was in the levy, that was in the bond issue, the $30 million. We built those costs in. Right now, those are looking like they're gonna be a little under budget. Summit Construction feels very positive about the soils after the soil studies, and they've been out there and dug test holes. They want to get in there in July, August, September, October, when the ground is dry, and they think that can save us money. We may not have to do any line stabilization of the soil at all. So that would be huge, because we built quite a bit of money in, about $600,000 was built in for soil stabilization in the project, and we may not have to do any of that.
And that's what's nice about the whole thing, the whole process that we go through is you look at this and the total number, there's dollars that might just actually, I mean, not to say come back.
Well, you got the contingency.
Yeah.
You just hope at this point, the only thing that could exceed that is if we start getting a bunch of change orders.
Right.
We shouldn't with our, knock on wood, with this type of work, but that would be the only thing that would cause us to exceed these GMPs.
What about the raw materials that could go up?
Well, the
That should
the
be in
cost
there.
of labor and the cost of materials is what has changed a lot since Tony Shore stood in here in October 2017. The cost of materials has gone up more than what was expected. Steel, electric has gone up big time. The lighting has gone up significantly. The technology budget went up a little bit because these panels that we're using, we don't use it to its capability, but the old projectors that we projected there, this is really an instructional resource for our teachers. It's interactive, they can touch, kids can use it. We did not want to take these out of the project. This is a little bit more cost, but we've been able to reduce savings in other areas. So I hope, you know, again, we wanted to make sure that we got through the schematic design and we put that out there that it was a potential to look at not doing the demolition. We got into design development and we had to find about $300,000. And I think it makes sense that that's the one thing that,
Oh, yeah,
Especially when none is actually probably a benefit on Jim's price. So are there any questions regarding that?
yeah, that's just facility management.
Okay, we'll move on to personnel and labor management. Mr. Mills, right?
I'm not aware of anything, other than voting on somebody's contract, which we've already done.
The OSB representative, Mr. Mills, Ms. Parker.
Not aware of anything. I think it's OSBA. There's something on the 31st that I'm gonna do. It's a thing on the computer about like what you've missed in the summer with, you know, funding and stuff. Not that we don't, you know, I thought, well, okay, it's only an hour.
I think,
Some webcast kind of thing.
I think I sent it to Jennifer. I think we got the notice for the assembly meeting in November,
Yeah.
the delegate assembly meeting.
I'm gonna go to a thing in August for the legislative.
Okay.
August, so.
Moving on to policy,
Just
that
as,
was discussed earlier, so.
yeah, I'm sorry, I just had to email Joe and Rod, they're both liaisons for the policy committee. I sent them an email with all the information, the policies, legal memos to support the need for it, but we'll bring that EpiPen policy to the board in August for one reading.
Safety, health, and wellness, Ms. Parker. Moving on to finance, Mr. Johnson, Mr. Brown. Okay, moving on to upcoming PTO boosters, Board of Education meeting. 8, 12, and 19 will be the next Board of Education regular meeting at the middle school library. 8, 16, and 19, the new teacher orientation day. 8, 19, 8, 20 will be the teacher PD days. Teacher work day on the 21st. 8, 22 will be the first day of school. At this time, we need a motion to adjourn from regular session to go into executive session for the purpose of discussing the appointment, employment, dismissal, discipline, promotion, demotion, or compensation of a public employee or official.
And Mr. Brad, Joe, if I could just
Absolutely.
interrupt one, I was remiss in my report, but I should have told you guys one thing that was kind of important, and that was that our fair booth is no more.
You were talking about that last year.
Okay,
I'd
so-
sit on one of those.
All right, so just so that you all are aware, I know you guys are gonna get questions come this fall on it.
Well, thanks for the information.
You talked about that last year.
Yeah.
Okay, so is there,
We will, if the board wants to invite, we have our legal counsel here to discuss.
Oh, was that?
Executive session.
Oh, you're
So
late.
just
Okay,
publicly want to make sure that everybody knows that legal counsel will be with us.
okay. I'll make the motion.
a motion made by Mr. Millis, second by Mr. Bratton,
Fine.
7:25, roll call please.
Mr. Mellis?
Yes.
Mr. Bratton?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Ms. Parker?
Yes.
Mr. Abbott?
Yes.